Does it make me look like a young Robert Redford?
Robert Redford?
Yeah. One of my old friends from high school worked for Sundance for decades. So I actually reached out to her when I saw that he passed away and made some connection. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana 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 Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana 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 Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So this morning, we'll hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 30? 30, text 19. Griheshvavishatam chapi Pumsam kushala karmanam Madvarta yatayamanam Nabandhaya grihamata Griheshva vishatam chapi Pumsam kushala karmanam Madvarta yatayamanam Nabandhaya grihamata Griheshva vishatam chapi Pumsam kushala karmanam Madvarta yatayamanam Nabandhaya grihamata.
Griheshvavishatam chapi Pumsam kushala karmanam Madvartayatayamanam Navandaya grihamataha
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Pumsam kushala karmanam
Madvartayatayamanam
Navandaya grihamataha
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Pumsam kushala karmanam
Pumsam kushala karmanam
Madvartayatayamanam
Madvartayatayamanam
Navandaya grihamata
Navandaya grihamataha
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Pumsam kushala karmanam Madvartayatayamanam Navandaya grihamataha
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Griheshvavishatam chapi Pumsam kushala karmanam Madvartayatayamanam Navandaya grihamataha Griheshvavishatam chapi Pumsam kushala karmanam Madvartayatayamanam Navandaya grihamataha
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Griheshvavishatam chapi
Pumsam kushala karmanam
Pumsam kushala karmanam
Madvartayatayamanam
Madvarta yatayamanam
Navandaya grihamataha
Navadayadrihamata.
Word to word. Griheshu,
Yeshu.
in family life.
Navadayadrihamata.
Avishatam,
Avishtam.
who have entered.
Whoever.
Cha, also.
Also.
Opi,
Avi.
even.
Even.
Pumsam,
Pumsam.
of persons.
Person.
Kushalakarmanam,
Kushalanam.
engaged in auspicious activities.
Engaged in auspicious activities.
Matvarta,
Matvarta.
in topics about me.
In topics about me.
Yata,
Yata.
is expended.
Is expended.
Yamanam,
Yamanam.
whose every moment.
Whose every moment.
Na,
Na.
not.
Na.
Bandhaya,
Navaya.
for bondage.
For bondage.
Griha,
Graha.
household life.
Household life.
Mata,
Mata.
considered.
Considered.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Those who are engaged in auspicious activities in devotional service certainly understand that the ultimate enjoyer or beneficiary of all activities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, when one acts, he offers the results to the Personality of Godhead and passes life always engaged in the topics of the Lord. Even though such a person may be participating in family life, he is not affected by the results of his actions. Responsively, please. Those who are engaged in auspicious activities,
Those who are engaged in auspicious activities.
in devotional service,
In devotional service.
certainly understand
Certainly understand.
that the ultimate enjoyer or beneficiary
That the ultimate enjoyer or beneficiary.
of all activities
Of all activities.
is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Is the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Thus, when one acts,
Thus when one acts.
he offers the results to the Supreme Personality of Godhead
He offers the results to the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
and passes life always engaged
As life always engaged.
in the topics of the Lord.
In the topics of the Lord.
Even though such a person may be participating in family life,
Even though such a person may be participating in family life.
he is not affected by the results of his actions.
He is not affected by the results of his actions.
Isn't that nice? We get a little wiggle room here. Srila Prabhupada's very rich purport. Generally, a person living in a family becomes overly attached to fruitive activity. In other words, he tries to enjoy the results of his activities. A devotee, however, knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and the supreme proprietor. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram. Consequently, the devotee does not consider himself the proprietor of any occupation. The devotee always thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the proprietor. Therefore, the results of his business are offered to the Supreme Lord. One who thus lives in the material world with his family and children never becomes affected by the contaminations of the material world. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Yagyartat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tadartam karma kaunteya mukta sangha sanachara. One who tries to enjoy the results of his activities becomes bound by the results. One who offers the results or profits to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, does not become entangled in the results. This is the secret of success. Generally, people take sannyas to become free from the reactions of fruitive activities. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do something as crazy, as drastic as that. One who does not receive the results of his activities but offers them instead to the Supreme Personality of Godhead certainly remains in a liberated condition. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Sri Rupa Goswami confirms this. Iha yasya hare dase karmana manasa gira nikhilasvapya avastasu jivan muktasu uchite. If one engages himself in the service of the Lord through his life, wealth, words, and intelligence, and everything he possesses, he will always be liberated in any condition. Such a person is called a Jivan Mukta, one who is liberated during this lifetime. Devoid of Krishna consciousness, those who engage in material activities simply become more entangled in material bondage. They have to suffer and enjoy the actions and reactions of all activity. The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore the greatest boon to humanity, because it keeps one always engaged in Krishna's service. The devotees think of Krishna, act for Krishna, eat for Krishna, sleep for Krishna, and work for Krishna. Thus, everything is engaged in the service of Krishna. A total life in Krishna consciousness saves one from material contamination. As stated by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, Krishna bhajane yaha hoy anukul, vishayar bali atyage taha hoy bhu. If one is so expert that he can engage everything or dovetail everything in the service of the Lord, to give up the material world would be a great blunder. One should learn how to dovetail everything in the service of the Lord, where everything is connected to Krishna. That is the real purpose of life and secret of success. As reiterated later in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Tasmada sakta satatam karyam karma samachara asakto hyacharam karma paramapnoti purusha. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, for by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. The 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita specifically considers material activities for the purpose of sense gratification and material activities for the purpose of satisfying the Supreme Lord. The conclusion is that these are not one and the same. Material activities for sense gratification are the cause of material bondage, whereas the very same activities for the satisfaction of Krishna are the cause of liberation. How the same activity can be the cause of bondage and liberation can be explained as follows. One may get this indigestion due to eating too many milk preparations, condensed milk, sweet rice, and so on. But even though there is indigestion or diarrhea, another milk preparation, yogurt mixed with black pepper and salt, will immediately cure these maladies. In other words, one milk preparation can cause indigestion and diarrhea, and another milk preparation can cure them. If one is placed in material opulence due to the special mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he should not consider that opulence a cause for bondage. When a mature devotee is blessed with material opulence, he does not become affected adversely, for he knows how to employ material opulence in the service of the Lord. There are many such examples in the history of the world. There were kings like Prithu Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Janaka and Dhruva, Vaivasvata Manu, and Maharaj Ikshaku. All of these were great kings and were especially favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If a devotee is not mature, the Supreme Lord will take away all his opulence. This principle is stated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yasyaham anugranami harishe tatanam shanai. My first mercy shown to my devotee is to take away all his material opulence. Material opulence detrimental to devotional service is taken away by the Supreme Lord, whereas a person who is mature in devotional service is given all material facilities. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukhaṁ Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Bande Shri Guru Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatharini Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo. Griheshvavishatam chapi pungsam kushala karmanam madbharta yata yamanam nabandhaya grihamataha. Those who are engaged in auspicious activities in devotional service certainly understand that the ultimate enjoyer or beneficiary of all activities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, when one acts, he offers the results to the Personality of Godhead and passes life always engaged in topics of the Lord. Even though such a person may be participating in family life, he is not affected by the results of his actions. So the Lord is blessing the Prachetas to enjoy like crazy for an insanely long time and assuring them that actually that long life is simply to accommodate their practice of devotional service, because he feels confident that because of their quality and their training and everything, that they will be able to engage such facilities in the service of the Lord. So, we see in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna declines to take part in the war. He tells, when he's confronted with what he actually has to do, which is fight against and possibly kill some folks to whom he's most attached. I mean, Krishna, as I remember it, Krishna pulls the chariot directly in front of Bhishma and Drona, who are Arjuna's, closest attachments on the other side of the battlefield, and he just kind of freaks out. He has a nervous breakdown, and he says, "I can't do it." Drops his bow, Gandiva bow, on the ground, and you can kind of picture him, allowing his quiver full of arrows to just kind of dump on the ground. And I remember when I first moved into the Honolulu temple back in March of 1970, there were two pictures on this one wall that I found. Actually, there were three pictures in the temple room that I found really moving. One was the old Brijbasi print of Murli Manohar, where Krishna's got his flute and he's in front of the waterfall and there's a full moon. He just looks, he's got this look in his eye that just kind of grabs you and says, let's dance, let's play, let's have some fun. An old favorite of the Geezer devotees, one of my deities, my Shalagram Shila, the name my older daughter suggested for him was Murali Manohar. The other was the Brijvasi Gopal Krishna, which Muralidhar copied very nicely. But there's just something about the original. The original that's really special. And the other was a picture of Arjuna kneeling on the ground with his bow and his quiver on the ground. And he's looking really distressed, and Krishna's just standing there like, okay, look, we've got things to do here. And I think that one moved me because I was, really beginning to understand the Bhagavad Gita in a way that I was never able to at all. Well, actually, the truth is, before I encountered Bhagavad Gita as it is, as many times as many translations as I tried to read, and as much as I tried to understand what was going on, it eluded me. Of course, I later came to feel that I was being protected from improper presentations of Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna declines to fight, and he proposes that it might be, rather than, be the cause of so much suffering and social disruption, widespread social disruption, he proposes that he just go to the forest and be a yogi. That would be a better plan, right? Sounds more spiritual. So what Krishna does is he's showing him kind of from somewhat different perspectives, different angles of vision, that a real yogi is also someone who acts in this world, but with a particular consciousness. And that's what we see. So we see in the 3rd chapter of the Gita, how to dedicate apparently ordinary activity to the Lord, and make that have that activity become an act of sacrifice. And we see that throughout the Gita, but Srila Prabhupada focuses particularly on the 3rd chapter. And he says in his purport, is one who offers the results or profits, whatever the results are of their activities to the Lord, they become free. They don't become entangled in the results of those activities. And he says, generally people take sannyas to become free from the reactions of fruitive activities. The act of taking sannyas, it's supposed to burn up the reactions to so many activities. And the Mayavadi sannyasis consider that by having taken sannyas, they have become not just liberated, but they have become Narayana, right? And so such a drastic move isn't really required, because the essence, a couple of ways to see the essence of sannyas in his Bhakti Aloka commentaries on Upadeshamrita, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the essence of sannyas is equality in vision, treating everyone equally, and nonviolence. But throughout the Bhagavatam especially, we see that the essence, what real sannyas means, is dedication of our work, words, and activities for the service of the Lord. And that is actually the core of sannyas. And Srila Prabhupada points out a number of times that you don't have to change your clothes. You don't have to change your name or anything like that. That real sannyas means living in that way. So even in family life, to the extent that at least to the extent that our work, words, and thoughts are all dedicated to the Lord, Kaya, Mana, and Vakya, then that's, Srila Prabhupada says, that's sannyas. So when those three Grihastha couples, when he sent them to England back in 1968, that was actually sannyas, even though one couple had an infant. Still, that was sannyas. And when you read about how they lived when they first got to England, they didn't know anybody, they didn't have anything, they didn't have a place to stay. They lived in a warehouse or something at one point, hassled by British biker gangs. Can you imagine British biker gangs? Oh, pardon me. So that's sannyas, and I remember reflecting. I met one couple when I was traveling as a sannyasi. One couple who got married to preach, got married for preaching, and I remembered, oh, actually, when my former wife and I married, we got married to preach. We got married to go to South America and introduce Krishna consciousness in Peru. That was the whole point of our getting married. So we were going to follow in the footsteps of, Mukunda and Janaki and Gurudas and Malati, and Shamsundar and Malati and Gurudas and Jamuna. And we thought, okay, this is actually going to please Srila Prabhupada. Things happened, and we instead ended up back in Hawaii. But that was, we got married to preach. And Srila Prabhupada was pleased by that. One of the devotees mentioned to Srila Prabhupada that, Babru and Satyaki, they just recently got married, but they're not going to be around in 6 months for a fire sacrifice. They're going to be alone in South America. And maybe they'll have some new devotees. Maybe that'll just be the two of them. And Prabhupada said, if there's some grihastas in the community preparing to have a fire sacrifice, they can join them. They don't have to wait. Because he saw what we were doing. We had gotten married to go preach. And a little while after that, when those circumstances first brought us back to LA to kind of check in with Srila Prabhupada, we had a quite long private meeting with him. I think it lasted just about 2 hours. Maybe it was a little even more than 2 hours. Prabhupada actually cleared his calendar for the morning to meet with us. There had been some things going on in Hawaii, and he kind of wanted to take care of us, even though we weren't big shots. And in the course of that conversation, one of the devotees, single man, young single man, is probably 24, 25. And Prabhupada asked him what he was doing for a living. And he said, well, I have a private pilot's license, and I'm studying to get an instructor's rating so I can make a living teaching people how to fly airplanes. Now, before this meeting, Prabhupada excused all the big shots from the room. He kicked them out and asked them to please close the door behind them. And I could imagine that if some of those exalted souls had been in the room at the time, they would have jumped all over this poor devotee and told him, you're single. You shouldn't. This is nonsense. This is Maya. You should move into the temple, surrender to us, and shave up and all that stuff. That wasn't Srila Prabhupada's response at all, though. When he told him that he wanted to make a living teaching people to fly airplanes, Prabhupada was completely unfazed. And he just said, devotees in devotional service cannot be stereotyped. But there's nothing that cannot be engaged in Krishna's service. Simply, we require guidance from the expert spiritual master how to engage everything in Krishna's service. That is the only catch. And when Srila Prabhupada said that, I was just completely floored. And I just thought, okay, that was kind of etched indelibly in my memory. So Srila Prabhupada says after the verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Iha yasya hare dase karmana manasagita nikalasvapa apya avastasu jivan muktasu uchite, that someone's considered to be liberated even in this lifetime if they live like this. He says, if through his life, wealth, words, intelligence, and everything he possesses, he will always be, if he engages those things, that actually brings about liberation for that devotee, because they're thoroughly immersed in devotional service. This purport is so rich. There were just so many connections. I, honest to goodness, wasn't sure where I wanted to go with this. But that verse, Srila Prabhupada citing that verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu made me want to take a look at the context for that verse. So this is in the second chapter of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Oops, wrong book. This is in the second chapter of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is the chapter that discusses sadhana bhakti. And it's largely a discussion, well, it's largely a presentation of the 64 main angas of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. And when he talks about the 47th item, which is dasyam, acting as a servant, this is how it's set. This is where this verse comes in. It's one of the pramana or evidence verses for this. So Rupa Goswami writes, dasyam is defined as offering the results of prescribed duties and acting as a menial servant of the Lord. So this is distinct from the sthayi bhava, one of the 5, main emotional connections with the Lord in devotional service. Shanta, Dasya, Sakyam, Vatsalya, and Sringar or Madhurya. This is distinct from that. This is a particular anga of bhakti. And what we see is that there are 2 categories. One is, oh gosh, where did it go? Thought I must have had that highlighted. There are 2 categories of dasya. And so one is offering prescribed duties, and the other is acting as a servant, feeling oneself as a menial servant of the Lord. And so Srila Rupa Goswami discusses this in the ensuing verses. And so the first is kind of like dedicating your varnashram duties to the service of the Lord, the results of your varnashram duties to the service of the Lord. And the second, is more essential. And this verse is used to describe that more essential, seeing ourselves as nothing more than servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here he cites this verse. He says, he who has a desire to serve the Lord with action, minds, and words is called a liberated jiva in all circumstances. And so this is discussed a little further, in a sense, in Srila Jiva Goswami's oh, no, actually, I didn't want to go there first. Trying to keep all these things straight in my head. We see the same kind of attitude, that the same activities that we would engage in, that we might be afraid would entangle us in the world of karma, that these same things actually become catalysts for our liberation, that they actually bring us to the lotus feet of the Lord. So this is actually addressed in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto. So this is Narada Muni again instructing Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadev's kind of having an existential crisis of his own. He's compiled the Vedas and the Puranas and the Itihasas and still feeling unsatisfied, still feeling unfulfilled, still feeling like there's something missing, a hole in his heart. And so Narada Muni has kind of shown him that there's a very clear distinction between bhakti and everything else. And it is, in fact, that he has not sufficiently glorified. He hasn't created a text that sufficiently glorifies Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his devotees, and the service that they render to him. That's his problem. And so he says, O Brahmana, Vyasadeva, it's decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. And then he says, this really interesting verse, O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? So this is what Srila Prabhupada is talking about in today's purport, that if you take too many milk products, you might have digestive problems. But those same digestive problems can be cured by another milk product prepared in a particular way. So this thing being offered therapeutically. So this is discussed in Srila Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandarbha. And in the Bhakti Sandarbha, when he's talking about sadhana bhakti, he says this bhakti is of 3 types: aropa siddha, sangha siddha, and swarupa siddha. So then he explains, Srila Jiva Goswami explains these. He says, aropa siddha bhakti, we can call that bhakti by superimposition, or bhakti by assignment. This has the form of karma or some other method, karma, jnana, or whatever, which is by its nature not inherently bhakti. So gardening isn't inherently bhakti. Or fixing cars, not inherently bhakti. Writing isn't inherently bhakti. Making music isn't inherently bhakti. But he says they become bhakti by offering those results to the Lord. So aropa siddha bhakti, this is what we what we think of as dovetailing. Srila Prabhupada uses that word in connection with that verse from Srila Bhakti, Bengali verse from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then he says, Sangha Siddha Bhakti, bhakti by association with bhakti, refers to jnana and karma. So aropa siddha bhakti also includes like getting up in the morning, bathing, brushing your teeth. Brushing your teeth isn't inherently bhakti. But if you brush your teeth and then take a bath and put on clean clothes, then you can come to Mangalarti all fresh, all shiny and new. So those activities actually become bhakti by offering the results to the Lord. And he says, Sangha Siddha Bhakti, or bhakti by association, refers to jnana and karma practiced as minor parts of bhakti, something that supports bhakti. So, engaging in activities that are supportive of bhakti. And he cites a verse from the Bhagavatam. This is one of the Navyogendras speaking to King Nimi. He says, the disciple should in the beginning learn detachment of the mind from all things of this world while showing mercy to the inferior, friendship to equals, and respect to superiors. So he's saying, he points out that in this verse, bhakti is the process and detachment is an element of jnana, which is supportive of bhakti. So we talk a lot about vairagya and vidya, vairagya and jnana, detachment or renunciation and knowledge. But these things are only bhakti if they're used to help us support our bhakti. Renunciation itself it's not even an anga. Not only is it not inherently bhakti, it's not even an anga of bhakti. Renunciation is an anga of jnana for attaining sayujya or kaivalya moksha. And karma as well. Knowledge is also an anga of jnana, cultivating vidya. Now, trying to understand sambandha jnana, the nature of our relationship with the absolute truth, that is supportive of bhakti. So sambandha jnana, cultivating sambandha jnana or abhideya jnana, how to activate that understanding, how to put it into action, how to make that part of our behavior. And prayojana jnana, what's the actual goal of engaging in bhakti? That kind of jnana, those are assistants, as Bhanu Swami has translated here. Those are things that are supportive of our bhakti. So they become bhakti. And then he says, Swarupa Siddha Bhakti, not manifesting through karma or jnana, because what's the definition of pure devotional service that Srila Rupa Goswami gives us at the beginning of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the first chapter, 11th verse? Anukul yasya sankalpa, no. Anyabhilashita shunyam, jnana karma dhyanavartam. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam Bhaktiruttama. So, in order for an activity to be Swarupa Siddha Bhakti, it has to be free from the aspiration for gaining the results of karma, jnana, yoga, or whatever. Anyabhilashita shunyam, jnana karma adi, everything else, anavritam. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam. It's ongoing activity, constant activity that is intended to give pleasure to Krishna. Jiva Goswami analyzes the words in that verse very meticulously. And what's his authority for doing so? Well, he was Rupa Goswami's editor for Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So he worked very closely. He was probably worked like knee to knee with Srila Rupa Goswami a lot while getting that book ready to publish. So he says, Swarupa Siddha Bhakti, not manifesting through jnana or karma, completely free from the aspiration for the results of karma or jnana or yoga. Taking the form of hearing and chanting about the Lord is directly favorable to the Lord as its essence and is fixed in its devotion. In other words, that's inherently bhakti. Swarupa Siddha Bhakti means things that are inherently bhakti. And then he says there are different divisions even of Swarupa Siddha Bhakti. And there are things that you do, things that you do with your mind, things that you do with your body, things that you do with your voice. And if you look at those, once you get through the first 20 angas of sadhana bhakti presented in the second chapter of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the do's and the don'ts, which Srila Rupa Goswami says constitute the entrance to the temple of bhakti. Those 20 things, that 10 that we observe by doing and 10 that we observe by avoiding, those 20 things, he says, they constitute the entrance to the temple of bhakti. In other words, we don't really have full access to the others until we begin to actually make those things part of our lives as well. And he says, of those 20 things, the first 3, taking shelter of a spiritual master, accepting initiation and instruction from the spiritual master, and in serving the spiritual master with confidence, with affection, with intimacy even. Those 3 things are essential. Those three things you don't skip. But then when you look at the other 44 angas of sadhana bhakti that are presented in that chapter, the first, maybe 2 or 2.5 dozen are organized by the angas of the body with which we perform those angas of bhakti. So there are some that we perform with our mind, some we perform with our eyes, some with our ears, some with our tongue, some with our body, with our hands, some with our legs, and some with our voice. So they're all, if you look at them, they're organized in chunks. I remember when I had a paper, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I had them highlighted in different colors. I think I probably highlighted them in different colors on my Kindle version as well. So we can see, not only is bhakti the absolutely most powerful thing of all. I think I might have shared this the other day, that this verse from that Srila Jiva Goswami cites in his Priti Sandarbha, the last of his 6 Sandarbhas, which discusses the goal of engaging in bhakti, which is priti, or love, prema, for Krishna. He cites a verse from something he refers to as Matara Shruti, which makes it sound to me like it's a Vedic text. And I don't remember the Sanskrit again, but he says, only bhakti has the power to show us Krishna. Only bhakti has the power to bring us near to Krishna. Only bhakti has the power to control Krishna. Therefore, bhakti is the most powerful thing of all. But we see here that not only is bhakti the most powerful thing of all, but it is astonishingly generous. Right? The Lord himself is telling these princes, you're going to live incredibly long lives of incredible luxury and comfort. But that's not going to hinder your devotional service. Instead, that long, happy life, that's going to enhance your devotional service, and ultimately you'll come to the point of pure devotional service. So bhakti is not, it's very powerful and it's user-friendly. Even we can be engaged in bhakti. So that's that. I just find this really encouraging. These verses are just really cool. Somehow or other, Krishna brought me here to Tucson right at this particular time so that I could pay close attention to these verses. Okay, so I'll stop here and entertain any discussion because I've spoken way too long. Sureshwara Prabhu?
Just in that last point of, so the Lord is very generously making that boon, that benediction to them. Now to get that boon, they had to have some extraordinary bhakti qualification. And maybe you can, well, the Lord even says it in text 80 a while before, because you are friendly. Yeah, but this whole thing of what's inherently bhakti and what's not inherently bhakti, it seems pretty subtle, because Like I can be chanting Hare Krishna. Like one of those principles in Nectar Devotion is chanting Hare Krishna. But I can be chanting Hare Krishna and just be completely at the movies, right? So what does it mean to be inherently bhakti? It's not an external thing. That's kind of like
well, it is externally and internally bhakti, but the quality of the bhakti depends on the intent of the practitioner. Krishna is known as Bhavagrahi Janardana.
Yeah.
So what he accepts is our whatever devotion we have to offer. He tells us, in the 9th chapter of the Gita, if you have bhakti and you do this with bhakti, you offer it with bhakti, I'll even take a glass of water, a salad, a leaf of fruits, a flower. It's something really simple. It's the bhakti that's the active ingredient. He doesn't need my salad. He doesn't need my mango.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't need my kombucha or whatever. But if I have some affection for the Lord, and I offer it, and I imbue those things with that affection and offer them to the Lord with love, he accepts it, and it becomes prasadam. And in the next verse, what does he say?
Oh,
everything.
Yeah, all that you do. Yeah.
Everything you do should be done with this mentality. So the how powerful that bhakti is depends on its purity, and the purity is what we see in the heart of the particular bhakta. So, if I've got my hand in my bead bag and I'm scrolling with that finger that sticks out of the hole, but I'm chanting snick, snick, ram, ram, snick, snick, ram. That's better than not even doing that, in a sense. At least you have some intention to eventually chant decent japa. But it's not very good japa. The bhakti's not very strong. Maybe I have a habit that, somehow or other I got to pull down those 16 counters on my bead bag during the day. So, I drive when I'm watching, I chant when I'm watching TV, I chant while I'm scrolling on my phone, I chant while I'm driving, I chant while I'm at the movies or whatever, maybe. It's better than not chanting. After all, we may say, okay, that's offensive chanting because it's inattentive. But what's the result of namaparad? Pardon? Well, we hope. But the immediate result is material progress, material happiness. Malavas gives us liberation. And then Shuddhanam gives us prema. So, we hope that by our, casual chanting that we might actually eventually get to move through the clearing stage to pure chanting. So there are a lot of subtleties, there are a lot of nuances, there are a lot of other places there are so many connections just because it's a long purport with lots of citations, lots of verses being quoted. There are a lot of I just saw a lot of connections that I could have followed. I just had to kind of narrow them down because I'm notorious for ignoring the clock anyway.
I have more to follow up, but that's the other hand, so.
That sounds like a breakfast conversation.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
When this came up in a fairly well-known morning walk in Honolulu in February of '75, Srila Prabhupada, one devotee, a couple of the devotees were trying to drive a wedge between Srila Prabhupada and devotees who lived outside the temple. And one devotee said, they're not even following the regulative, well, you can probably tell by the way I said it who it was. They're not even following the regulative principles. And Prabhupada said, then, so what is the question, then what is the seventh offense in chanting the holy name? Nam no balad yasya papa buddhi. Engaging in sinful activities on the strength of chanting. And he said, that is like trying to start a fire with wet wood. You don't start, it's really hard. You can get a fire going with green wood, but you cure it first, generally, right? You cut a tree down, and you cut it up and then you split it and you let it cure during the summer, They say wood fires warm you twice, once when you split the wood and then once when you burn it. So, you let it cure over the summer. When I lived at Bhaktivedanta Village in the foothills, Sierra foothills, back in the 80s, that was really clear what was happening. Ramananda Roy would, he would get the firewood and cut it and split it and everything like that. But it would cure over the summer. And in those Sierra foothills, it's as dry in the summer as it is here, and as hot. We had 110, 115 degree days, and we tried to cool our places with swamp coolers because they work there because it's so dry. But so, he said that's exactly right. He said it's like trying to start a fire with wet wood. It's very difficult. It will take, and he said, it will take a long time. But he didn't say stop chanting. So, even our poor japa is eventually, we hope we'll get there. Anything else? Yes. What is your name?
Ofire.
Ofar. Gotcha.
Ofire, yes. So I had not so much of a question, but like a curiosity type of question. So it's like every time we chant, they say it's important for us to chant, and especially on our last days, or like on our last breath. Is that engaging within like us knowing how to like channel our energies to where we're supposed to be going? Because if we're going somewhere, I think you spoke about this just yesterday about the moon, reaching the moon and coming right back down. And if we're channeling correctly and we're chanting correctly and we're taking this lifetime to learn how to chant, and it's just like brother right there said that even he could be at the movies and it just pops up like just he's just chanting, so like when we're going through pain or on our last days, we will be able to block that emotion or that feeling of pain through the chanting, because we're channeling our energies. And is that how like we live this world? Or?
Yeah, it's a lot like that. As we practice chanting, what we're hoping is that even if we go to a movie, that we may spontaneously, somehow or other in that movie, we may think of Krishna. We may, during lulls in the action or something like that, we may find the Mahamantra going in our head. But what we ultimately want is that chanting will cleanse our heart to the extent that we really do see ourselves, as we were reading in those verses in the Bhagavatam, as servants, menial servants of Krishna. That's what we're all about. It's really about taking our consciousness to Krishna's lotus feet. So as we, it's like anything. How do you get to be good at anything? Kirtaneshwar will tell you how you get to be a good guitarist. Practice, right? Practice. We say practice makes perfect, but in the context of bhakti, I think it's probably more helpful to see that practice makes for progress. There's a story I often tell about this master cellist of the great. He was considered the greatest cello player of the 20th century, Pablo Casals. And when he was in his 90s, when his performing career was way in his rearview mirror, he was being interviewed by a journalist who asked him, well, in the course of the interview, Maestro Casals mentioned that he every day practiced for several hours, practiced cello. And he said, by practice, I don't mean playing pieces. By practice, I mean running scales and doing exercises. And the journalist was kind of bewildered by that, because it's not like he's going to go out on stage and wow everybody with this. It's like he spends several hours warming up so then he can play the pieces or something like that. So she asked him, Maestro, you don't even perform in public anymore. Why is it that you spend so much time every day practicing? And he said, I think I'm making progress. So that's what we're after. We want the chanting to bring us closer to Krishna. And as Krishna says in the Gita, if we practice properly, at the end of life, our consciousness will be with Krishna. And so if we practice chanting with great attention and affection, then that's what's more likely to come up at the time of death, when there are all these other things, all these weird things going on in our body. And we're able to not so much block them, but just kind of let them go. This is how it is. My body's dying. And that's cool. It's made for that. And now it's time for me to move on. And we hope that Krishna will bring us to him by the power of our chanting. That sounds like a signal. Thank you all so much. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam.
Thank you.
Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. My big regret is that we didn't plan for my youth